So happy I have this creaky chair to match my creaky body. It talks to me, this chair, but mostly it goes, ugh. So, resting, coming to rest. I felt I wanted to talk a little more about a word I've been slipping in here, savoring. I'm often looking for new words that speak to something essential to this practice. After more than 40 years, mindfulness is a very serviceable term, but I find that often want to use different terms that somehow speak to the heart really being engaged in the moment. Mindfulness definitely has that, is what it includes, but I look for other words that can kind of also say it too, that have a little different energy and kind of refresh my system. So savor lately has been a word that I've been using that I find helpful. It somehow brings that about, that if I stop to savor the moment, it feels like I give it a different energy. I'm more engaged. It's less just observational, to use a word that actually is more about taste. Something about seeing as a metaphor. There's a kind of a distance to it. Savoring, wow, there's just like becoming it, becoming one with it, the way you do your food, the way you do tastes. They just go into you and like their essence is released and known. So I like that with the word savor when it comes to understanding the moment. It also has this element of rest to it when I use it. You know, when you're really savoring something, there's a pause there, isn't it? If you're savoring your food, if you actually taste the bite and you really want to know what it's like, you have to slow down and be right there. You can't really savor that well on the run. So there's an intrinsic way that just invites me to slow down, the word savor. So I've been using it. And so like meditating, to savor the breath. It's something very simple. Savoring doesn't mean that you have to like grab a hold of something, but that you really take in the flavor, and each breath does really have a flavor. There's an actual feeling that comes with breathing. We don't really have a word for it because it's so basic, but it's wholesome. I do know that there's something wholesome just in breathing and relaxing into breathing. Something just feels very, very wholesome, very right about that. So savoring the breath. One of the things that I've been really savoring for years, it's just to become a habit, is whatever's going on in the sky. I'm very much, I have that kind of atmospheric something that I pay attention to, the light. I'm very sensitive to light. And I feel like in every room there's a certain flavor to light. But when you step outside, there's a flavor to the sky. There's a flavor to the light in the sky. And that certainly involves, the clouds and the color, the light at that moment. One of the things that I do when I savor, and again, this is really, I think, become habit, is I drop the frame of reference of like and dislike. You know, if you're out looking at the sky, and you're using the frame of like and dislike, so quickly everything gets kind of turned into something as to whether it meets your expectation or not. There's something impoverishing about that frame of reference, the like and dislike. Instead, if you just kind of remove that frame of reference, there's an incredible richness. Even on some of these dark, dreary days, I must say they're dark and dreary, the wet ones, the foggy ones. It's the winter time. It's the darkest month here, approaching the solstice. And yet there's a flavor to it that you can savor. If you drop kind of a certain frame of reference that is deeply human, you know, to like the warmth and the sunshine and to not so much like the darkness and the damp, but you can actually drop that frame of reference and just experiencing things as they are. And this is very much, I think, the key to savoring, is dropping that liking, disliking, wanting, not wanting, which so quickly goes with liking and disliking. What you want, what you don't like. You want what you like, you don't want what you don't like. And so, you know, to step outside and to drop that frame of reference. Here it is, a day of what? You know, a day of what? You can savor it. Even if it's pouring rain, even if it's, you know, kind of raw. We've had a lot of raw days. And there's something, you know, my body contracts. There's something in me that doesn't really like them in that way. But it's possible to just let them be what they are. And in that moment of letting them be what they are and dropping like and dislike, it's as if eternity, if I can use that word, if that's not overblown, it's sort of like eternity meets that moment rather than your likes and your dislikes. It's like the knowing of that moment. There's something vast in it. Check it out. See if you can see what I'm pointing to. Something vast happens when consciousness drops liking and disliking. And it doesn't take a long time if that can occur to you to do. And there's a kind of savor there. You know, there's a kind of savoring of the world without the framework of like and dislike. If I can put it that way. There's a kind of a flavor to it. And oddly enough, I like it. You know, having dropped the framework of like and dislike, I find I like not having that framework. And by like, I mean it feels wholesome. I mean it feels deeply attuned and at peace. It's a bit of a paradox, isn't it? It's a bit of a paradox. Sometimes we have to drop our demand of reality in order to actually find joy there. We have to drop our demands on the moment. You know, and sometimes I experiment with it in aches and pains. You know, in some ways, it's easier to deal with the weather. You know, the liking and disliking of the weather, it's somewhat fictitious. But then you come to your body, and your body has a kind of ache to it. And it's not easy to just kind of drop the frame of reference and have it be a likable experience. There's something intrinsic about pain in the body, discomfort, that is difficult. So interestingly, in terms of resting with pain, you have to drop the frame of reference pain itself, that word, and let it be what it is. And let your aversion be what it is too, because I don't know that that's going to immediately fall away. It might. But when there's discomfort in the body, to let it be what it is. Drop the frame of reference of pain. I haven't worked with it much, but you could drop the frame of reference sick too, when there's an illness. That word carries so much in it, as does pain. So try dropping that frame of reference, that this is sickness. Then what is it? What does it become when it's not sickness? The scratchy throat, the cough, the stuffy nose, the achy body. The few times that I've tried it, and I admit I have not tried it much. Again, I feel in some ways this is the right language, even though another part of me is saying it sounds overblown, but it's sort of like suddenly eternity meets sickness. Eternity meets the body, discomfort, the ailing in some way. Like it's actually there to witness it, to know this, to know sickness. And maybe even just for a moment, there's a ceasing of wanting it to be different, wanting it to be over, wanting your cold to be over, wanting COVID to be over, wanting your cancer to be over. You can witness compassionately that self of yours that wants it to be over. That's certainly a possibility too. But again, I've just so seen the power of dropping the frames of reference that the mind puts around the way things are, the way things should be. I love savoring my dog. She changes moment to moment. Her expressions, even when she's sleeping, for heaven's sakes. Watch your dog sleep. With each breath, there's something. There's just something changing moment to moment. There's life there. There's beauty. That's an easy one. There's a lot of liking in that moment. And yet, even with the pleasure of it, the liking of it, it's easy to not do it. It's easy to not take the moment. So again, savoring. Water is another thing that comes to mind. Water is highly underrated. The taste of water. It's like the taste of the breath. It's so subtle, it almost comes across as blank. It's not blank. It's just very subtle and very basic. Try savoring water. When we come to rest, the world meets us as it is. And in meeting it as it is, there's a moment of contact with what is concretely real. And our hearts are fed by that, by contact with what is concretely real. When we are actually open to things as they are. If we're not, if we're running with our filters on, of liking and disliking, wanting and not wanting, if we're running with our filters on, we often are hungry for something and we don't know what it is we're hungry for. I would suggest often we're hungry for this sort of contact. This sort of contact that requires that we actually stop, requires that we actually come to rest and let ourselves be touched by what's present. And initially, when the mind is used to drinking Coca-Cola and, sweet things, fuzzy things, maybe water doesn't taste so good. Maybe it doesn't do anything for you. And I think it's sometimes true when we slow down. There can be a little boredom there, Mark asked you to do nothing for a while and you don't quite know what to do with yourself. There's a little discomfort, there's some boredom. Like, oh, what's here? Well, what's there to do? Oh, I'm not supposed to do anything. Oh, well then what's supposed to happen? There's a deep sort of confusion about that. And I know, doing retreats sometimes, particularly in the beginning, the first day or two, there's some boredom, there's some tediousness, there's some falling asleep, which may be due to boredom and tediousness and also due to just chronic kinds of stress that are beginning to fall away. But it takes a while sometimes to attune to that level of not doing anything, to have the whole being become sensitive to that level of not doing anything and to actually be able to take things in. I don't think you have to quite do that in your life, but if you slow down initially and you find, you don't quite know what to do with yourself, there's a thing, let that just be something you pass through. It takes a while, perhaps, just to know what I'm talking about, to settle, to taste, to savor whatever's happening. All right.